a partner I was with for nearly 7 years. So work was more of a priority than the relationship. And I think at that time I was doing my degree and I was working 40, 50 hours a week. I didn't give it the time that I should have really. And that person gave a lot of their own time. And what it's made me realize is that, you know, if I want to have really enriched relationships in my life, romantic relationships, I really need to make the time for them. They're not just going to happen, unless I put time and effort into making sure that they're enriched, that the person feels I'm actually with them. I'm with them fully and wholeheartedly. And it's not just Louise here in body, but she's not here in mind.
Louise, at what stage in your life did you find yourself? What relationship broke you to discover yourself?
Really great question, John. And it's really thought-provoking, actually. I think the relationship, I suppose, for me that really broke, I suppose, the mold and really forced me to come out of myself, I suppose. Many years ago, I started my career in retail, and I was working with a retailer at the time, Next, and I remember I was always a bit of a people pleaser. I always kind of got on with people, but I struggled, I think, the most with having difficult conversations where, I would probably in the past, John, this is going back now, I would have been 19, 20 at the time. But going back, I probably would have shied away from having difficult conversations with people. I would have avoided it. I wouldn't have found it comfortable to have an awkward conversation where maybe I was worried on how the person would react. And when I was working in Next and I was promoted at the time from sales advisor into a supervisor role. So it was essentially I was working with the team for nearly a year and now having to manage my peers essentially. I really struggled with that, John. I really found it hard to ask them to do tasks that needed done. So what ended up happening was and it might sound a bit silly, I ended up doing nearly all the work myself. And this whole idea of delegation, I didn't even know what the word delegation meant at the time, John. I didn't really know how to ask people to bring people together. I didn't know how to, I suppose, get the team to support me. I was doing everything on my own. And where it got really tough was when, I was managing someone at the time and they kind of pretty much said to me, we're not going to really do what you say, Louise. And I didn't really know how to take that. So I avoided interacting with that person in particular. And then it really got challenging because it got to the point where I did need the support. And I had gotten quite upset about the whole kind of situation and I didn't know how to do it and how to actually bring a team along and understand how that actually works. And I had at the time a manager above me, and to this day she's absolutely fantastic. I look back and I go, I learned so much from her. Her name was Patricia at the time, and anyone that knows me that worked in Next, they'll definitely know the lady I'm talking about in question, because she was a fantastic people's person, John, and she had the ability to see what wasn't being said. So she could come down onto the shop floor, John, and she could observe me in a couple of minutes and she would know that something wasn't right with me. And I remember her taking me aside one day and we went out the back area of the store into the stock room, and she said, "What's going on, Louise? You just don't seem your bubbly self." And I just broke down and I said, "I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying my very best. I feel I'm not getting buy-in from the team. I feel like Some of them don't want to actually work with me. There's a bit of a struggle there. And at the time, I didn't realize, I suppose, I didn't have that outside perspective, John, of what was going on. I was internalizing everything and I was taking everything quite personal. I was new as a kind of a manager. I wanted to prove myself and I wanted to do really well because I was given this great opportunity. And Patricia said to me at the time, she said, Louise, you really need to get to know your team. You really need to really go down and to get them to buy into you and to get them to understand the purpose of why you're asking them to do all of this. I think my mindset prior to that, John, was that, you know, we go in, we do the work and that's it, and we just get on with it. And what that really taught me to do, John, and looking back now, it was really instrumental in my own personal and professional life, was this idea of how to influence people in a positive way, but to how to find out what motivates them. So, you know, after that meeting, I decided that I was going to approach this particular individual who I really struggled to actually speak to, John. I found she was quite passive aggressive. I would have kind of got a little bit anxious. So I decided to have little chats, not work related, but more personal chats to get to know the individual. And I suppose what came out of that was she actually got to know me a little bit better personally. And this whole idea of people buy into people first, really rings true to me. It's not a saying, because that taught me that I really need to get to know the person. And it's not just about the job or what needs to get done. It's actually about the person behind that task, understanding what excites them, John, what motivates them. And, you know, we had a few tough conversations. She gave me a couple of home truths of my own leadership style, of how I, you know, go into work and I put my head down and I get on with it, and I was on my own. And I was actually, in hindsight, I was actually isolating myself to the rest of the team because I didn't know how to actually lead. I was doing everything on myself. I was getting quite stressed about it at the time. And that experience, that went on for a couple of months. It wasn't a one conversation flip and everything changed. There was a lot of things that happened along the way that led to a breaking point where then I had that conversation with Patricia. But what that enabled me to do is, John, it enabled me to change the way Louise, I suppose, interacts with people in the workplace and get the best out of people. So where I would have probably reacted and done the work, I then started to really slow down and stand back more and go, okay, I know all this work has to get done. I have a buyer on the phone ringing me that they want this ordered. I have this person. You've so many different people pulling out of you in retail. You've branch merchandisers, you've sales managers, you've a lot going on. And what I realized is that I need to pull back more and stop running headfirst into things and getting overwhelmed then, because I'm not really taking a back seat and you know, that helicopter view piece. So that made me analyze better. It made me kind of look at things more subjectively and go, okay, Joe, who's the best person for that job? It's actually that person. Joe, who can support me in this? It's that person. Instead of Louise running ahead and trying to do it all herself. So that was really important. At the time, I didn't realize how important it was. There was another thing that I'd done as well that I think that has probably helped me a lot from not only my mental health piece, but from a personal piece, which was I journaled. And up until that point, John, I probably didn't really journal a lot, but I was quite stressed. And I remember at the time, my dad said to me, Louise, you need to get out of what's in your head and put it into paper, because once you see it in front of you, you'll be able to understand it better. So I used to journal a lot of what was happening in the workplace. And that wasn't to blame anybody, or it wasn't like that. I wrote things down to see, how is Louise functioning? How is Louise feeling when things happen that are unplanned, that are maybe unexpected, and that maybe throw Louise out of sync? What is my knee-jerk reaction? And I would write down how I was feeling at the time. And that gave me a really acute level of awareness, John, whereby I started to realize certain situations were actually causing me to emotionally react that way. And in order for me to be in any way successful, in order for me to be in any way happy in my job, I had to really master those feelings that I was getting when those things were happening.
So effectively what you're saying here, Louise, is that when you were appointed as an assistant manager in your store within the next group, you really lacked the managerial skill set to lead and motivate a team, and your team members saw you as being one of the team, one of the girls, I suppose you could say, not being sexist, you know, and they refused to see you, particularly a more senior team member who you had a difficult conversation with. They saw you as an equal rather than them being that, rather than you being their boss, I suppose you could say. So you had to develop a level of mental maturity and also to develop your managerial skill set in order to lead that team more effectively, and for you to stand back from the day-to-day operations and to try and see that bigger picture so you could manage more effectively those relationships with the sales team, the buyers, the merchandiser, the franchising team, your store manager, for example. Would that be true?
Yes, that's exactly what happened in that scenario, John. Yeah, definitely a change in, as you say, you know, I had to adapt into that role and change. And I think I resisted changing. I didn't understand what the change was at the time. I would have said I was quite confused. Even though I got promoted in the company I was in, I essentially didn't change what I was doing, John. I actually stayed doing the same thing I always done. And that's why I always say to people, if you're ever promoted internally, it's a lot more challenging than it is moving into a different company with a higher up position, because you're essentially going into the same building, but you've built all these habits and you're feeling that you're really in the same role, but you're not. So it's that adjustment that can be quite challenging to actually overcome.
And going back the years, I suppose you could say, what was your relationship, you know, growing up in County Galway with your parents and your siblings like?
Yeah, so I grew up on, I suppose, a small farm, and very family orientated, very close with my family. Even to this day, I would see my family nearly every day, John. To be honest, we live quite near to each other, next door to one another. The houses are nearly stuck on the house that I'm living in, and yeah, it was amazing. I think because I grew up where I grew up with my family quite close to me. I think there was a little bit of naivety on my part when I went to secondary school, where I was in a big Galway city secondary school. I I I I was challenged a little bit with the amount of people. I think I had grown up in an environment where everybody minded one another, John. We all had each other's best interests at heart. You were looked after by everyone, and that was fantastic. It gave me really good grounding, morals and values. You know, the values I have from then have stuck with me the test of time, you know. And you know, growing up, we wouldn't have had everything in the world, but we had what we needed, and there was a lot of love in the house, John. We were, you know, my grandmother would have hugged us regularly, would have told us how much, you know, they loved us. It was a really, really, really nice childhood to grow up in. And I think the level of selflessness that I witnessed as a child growing up, I think it really helped me as an adult, John. And even in secondary school, I was always known for helping other people. You know, I was always known for having a smile on my face. I was always known for cheering everyone up. And that came from the upbringing I had, that, you know, if you can in any way help people, you know, be happy, or feel happy in themselves, that was a gift that you can give, and it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything to be kind to people. It doesn't cost anything to help other people. So that was instilled in me. And when I look at even back on all the great opportunities I've had in work, it stems from those same behaviors that I would have learned as a child growing up, which was, it's not all about you, Louise. It's about other people, and we're on this planet and our legacy is to really be the best person we can by contributing. So I would do a lot of volunteer work and stuff like that. And I'm a big believer in giving back and helping other people, because, I just think, I look at my son who's 16 and I think I want him to be around people that are just as kind, that are, that are as giving and as supportive as what I've been given through my life.
And after you finish up in school, did you transition directly into the workplace, or did you go to college at any stage at all for a couple of years?
Yeah, so that's a funny story, and one that I used to cringe talking about in interviews, John, was the fact that I did work in retail. I worked in Marks and Spencer's at the time. Marks and Spencer's had just come into Galway. It would have been 2004, 2005 when Marks and Spencer's opened their new store. They took over from, I think, Roach's used to be there at the time. Roach's stores, if anyone remembers. And then Marks and Spencer's bought out a lot of the units there. So they opened, I interviewed for Marks and Spencer's, which is my first real taste of retail. And I think working for a UK multinational like Marks and Spencer's, you really see what good retailing is, John. You really see how they run the business operationally. You see how they train the staff, and it was a really, really great time. I worked in Marks and Spencer's, and I decided then that I wanted to give a go at college. So I went and done construction management, which seems a little bit strange, but if anyone that knows me knows that my dad is in the construction industry. So as kids, we would have been on building sites a lot, and I loved building sites. I loved the atmosphere. I loved renovating. I would have renovated my own furniture. So I do love that kind of side of things and doing things. So I decided to do a construction management course, and the goal was to do the course in Galway, which would get me into Sligo IT, which was the only one on the west of Ireland at the time, which was doing the health and safety course, because I wanted to essentially go on building sites and be a health and safety officer. Now, what happened in between that was I got pregnant with my son, Conan. So I decided that moving to Sligo wouldn't have been the best for me at the time. I would have been quite close to my family. I wanted that support because I had my son, and I wanted my family really around me. So I decided not to go to Sligo. And what came out of that was I ended up continuing, not meaning to. And if you ask anyone that works in retail, I don't think you wake up one morning and go, I want a job in retail. I think most of us end up in the sector and we end up realising how much we love it. So I ended up next opened a flagship store here in Galway. And when they opened that store in Galway, it would have been in 2007. And it was quite a big store at the time. And it was a big deal. It was in a brand new retail park here in Galway. It was before the recession hit, John. So there was a lot of money there. There was a lot of things being built and being bought up. So I was there on the opening day. I helped open the store in Next. And that's kind of really where my retail management career took off, was really in Next. I seen how they done, everyone's doing e-learning and training. Back in 2007, Next had e-learning training. They were way ahead of the game. They put a lot of money into training. So I got a taste for what I'm doing right now back in 2007 and Next. I knew I liked training. I knew I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to people, engaging with the team, showing them, how things are done. And I think through my own experiences, John, where I had kind of issues where I didn't understand how to be a leader, and I was mentored and coached by, other managers. I seen the power of what training really does. For me, it empowers people. It really empowers people. If you are working in the workplace and someone shows you how to do something and you're not having to run over and ask them all the time, and that you can actually do that yourself and build that confidence up in yourself that, you know what, I'm able to do this. This is super. I can do this on my own. It builds your confidence, and it's quite a gift to give someone. And I think what I learned through Next was, John, that education is so precious. It's a gift. And that led me on to, I suppose, doing a HR diploma, doing a bachelor's degree in training and education, and doing a lot more degrees along the way, because that passion was fueled through understanding how empowering it is to have knowledge.
We've had COVID. There's been great increases in the amount of retail organizations using e-commerce. So where do you see the future of retail in terms of the interpersonal relationships between the client and the customer?
Yeah, great question, John. I think it was probably a really great thing from the SME retail sector. COVID forced them to change. And what I mean by that is, I think a lot of people were probably set in their old ways of thinking. They were very comfortable with, we open the store, we close the store at 6:00, and that's it. And I think what people are starting to realize is that, retail isn't just a Monday to Saturday, Monday to Sunday, we close the shop. Customers are always browsing, customers are always buying. You need to ensure that they feel connected to you, connected to the store, connected to the brand. I think what you're going to see is there's going to be more customer engagement from social media, which will transpire onto the shop floor in stores. I think there's still an adjustment period happening now with retailers. I think they've seen the importance of it. I think there is still, this is online and this is in store. I see that with a few shops that I've been in, John, where, you can go online to our online store. That's not what it's about. The online and the in-store experience, they're supposed to work hand in hand together. So it's about bringing them together. If you look at stores that do click and collects, why do they do click and collects? Because it's to bring you into the store to pick up your package. And while you're coming in to pick up your package, you're going to see something else. You're going to be enticed to buy something else, or you're going to have a conversation with the sales advisor about the product you purchased. There's a lot of kind of noise over the last, I suppose, year or two, where you see people saying things like, it's all online, stores are dead, the shops closing down. I would say to the shops closing down is that they weren't innovating enough. They weren't keeping in touch with the customer. They probably, look, I know there's a bit of a challenge with rates and all of that stuff, but there's a lot more that we can do. There's a lot more that can be done in the industry. And I think bringing the two of those together is what's needed. If you see, even in the Asian market, they do a lot of live stream shopping, which is, I think it's set to hit nearly $10 billion in the next year or two, John, which is massive money. And I think for retailers in the Irish and the UK market, how can they incorporate things like live stream shopping into their business? Could they do a promotional campaign one month and they introduce live stream shopping, get the customer involved, doing demonstrations, doing brand activations? There's a lot there from a digital piece, from an e-commerce piece, that needs to be incorporated into the shop floor, into the bricks and mortar. So that could be, virtual reality headset where you're trying the product on. That could be, you're talking to a colleague on a chat. It could be a WhatsApp chat. You could do webinars for your store. There's loads there that we can incorporate into both. And I think that the great thing that's happened with COVID is we've realised that they're not separate entities. Prior to COVID, if you spoke to retailers, this was their shop, John, and this was their online store. And they seen them as two different businesses, whereas we need to see them all as one. They're interconnected, and one supports the other. If we're out of stock in the bricks and mortar, then get an iPad for your store. Tell the customer you're going to order it for them. You get it delivered to their home. There's loads of ways we can incorporate it in to make a better experience for the customer, which is really what you want. You want them to interact with the brand. If you were to walk into a store, John, and I was to serve you, and Louise is talking to you and asking you your needs, you need to have that same feel with the online world, with your website, with your store. So it's about incorporating those together, which I think is really important. They're really interesting. I had Paul Gallagher, who is the owner of the Skechers franchise in Ireland, on my podcast. And he gave me a really interesting fact around that most of their sales are actually from the bricks and mortar retail at the moment. It's not coming from the online stores. So even though we're hearing all this noise, when you actually talk to the retailers, it's actually coming from the stores, because what's happened is a lot of people are working remotely and at home now, John. And what's happened is we miss actually interacting with people. We miss going into the workplace and sitting down and eating our sandwich and chatting to someone. So we're actually using retail as a way of interacting and getting out of the house and chatting to people. So I would say to retailers, leverage it as best you can, both online and in store.
You mentioned you have a son that he's in his mid-teens now, I think. Are you currently in a relationship?
Sorry,
You mentioned that you have a son. Yeah. He's in mid to late teens at this stage. Are you currently in a relationship?
Yeah, so my son and me have a great relationship. I'm not currently in a relationship at the moment, a romantic one, but I have an absolutely amazing relationship with my son. He's absolutely fantastic. One of the reasons I set up my own business was I told him many years ago, when I was working really long hours in retail, that, I'll be around more, and the goal would be to have my own business and have more flexibility. It's a little bit harder when you're working for companies. You're on fixed contracts. You have to be on site to open a store at a certain time and close it down. So about 2 years ago, he's gone into 5th year now. He said to me in the car, I think he was in 1st year, I told him by the time he gets to 1st year in secondary school, John, that I would be around more. I wouldn't be working for a company, I'd be working for myself. And I remember quite vividly, he said to me in the car, I thought you told me you were going to have your own business. You haven't done that. And the penny kind of dropped, John, where I went, he's actually right. I've actually put it off. I said I was going to do it and I haven't done it. And that kind of gave me a little bit of a kick up the bum that, I did want to do this. That dream was a little bit buried because I got busy in the day-to-day life. I got busy doing loads of other things that was a little bit of a distant memory. So it made me realise that, kids have a great way of making you reflect and think about, yourself and what you say, because they'll hold you to it, whether you want it or not. So that got said to me. Then COVID hit and all of the stars started to align, where I was being told something. I was being told, you know what, Louise, now's your time. If you don't do it now, you're probably not going to do it, so yeah.
Looking back at your life, apart from that harsh lesson, I suppose, that you had when you broke down in the storeroom in front of your store, Patricia, many years ago, what lessons have you learned from all the relationships that have formed the person you are today?
Yeah, I think the lesson I've learned, I suppose, with relationships, John, and this goes across romantic relationships, friendships, family, and work relationships, is perspective and understanding that what that other person's perspective is. Because I think for me anyways, when someone gets upset with me, and I would see this a lot, I suppose, with work and with relationships, when things are hard, John, and when people react in a way of maybe getting really angry or getting really upset, that there's a reason for that emotion. And usually that emotion that's being expressed is their way of coping because they're feeling upset about a particular thing. So the biggest learning I've taken is that, you know, if someone is really upset, if someone is really angry, shouting at you in the workplace, getting really cross with you, don't react. It's not about you. It is actually not about you. It's something that's going on within themselves. So having that perspective to pull back, to go, do you know what? I'm going to come from a place of compassion. And I think if there was more compassion practiced, I think there would be less stress in the workplace, because when you're kind of working off a place where you're compassionate to other people and you're empathetic to what's actually going on and not taking it personally, you start to realize that, you know, at the end of the day, they're only a person and none of us are perfect. And we can show up sometimes and get upset about things, but sometimes you just need someone to just not react. You just want someone to listen to you. And that's happened a lot of times in my life, John, where I've had people in the workplace. It could be roaring, shouting, getting really cross. But I just sit back in my chair and I just go, okay, you know, go out for a walk, go grab a coffee. And then they'll come back and they'll sit down and they'll say, oh, I'm really sorry. I don't know what came over me. I got really upset. I just have something going on at home. So the biggest lesson for me is when people are really like that, go quiet. Just go quiet. Say nothing. And usually what ends up happening is they'll listen to what they're saying. They'll listen to themselves talk out loud and they'll realise, why am I behaving this way? And then they'll tell you, I don't know why I'm behaving this way, Louise. And you'll have a really great conversation. And that has been a really big thing for me, John. I would say it's been the best lesson I've ever learned in my life. Because there's been a lot of sticky situations where I've kept quiet, and that has really helped me with manage people and support people in the right way, because I haven't reacted to the emotion, but I sat back and I thought, there's something not right here with this person. There's something going on. This isn't like them. I know they don't mean it. I know it's not a personal thing. So that would be the biggest thing I'd say that I still practice to this day with people.
It's a very good example for younger professional people, I think, because it's very easy to be drawn into an argument when somebody else is angry at you, not with you. And I think you're getting good advice there to stay calm, stay cool, calm and collected, and don't get yourself into an argument with a person that you cannot win. It's better to keep your mouth closed, let them burn themselves out, and then afterwards they'll reflect on what they said or did to you, and they'll realise they've been in the wrong. So I think you've given very good advice there to any prospective professional person in the workplace. You mentioned there also that you're very close to your parents in terms of, you know, your houses are more or less beside each other, and your siblings in some cases. What do you do when you want to get away from the family just to get some fresh air to clear your head?
Yeah, great one. Yeah, we're very close, I suppose. When I want to get away, what does Louise do? I'm very much an outgoing person. I have a few friends that would like to go away and, you know, sit in a forest on their own and read a book. For me, I'm probably the opposite, John, in the sense that I'm that person that wants to go to a cafe and sit in between noisy people and have conversations. So I have a lot of friends, so I would meet up with people, and I think I realised when I left retail, John, and it was a bit of a learning in my first year, I got quite lonely being in the house on my own. And what I mean by that, when you work in retail and you have a team of 20 staff or whatever that is, and you've constantly customers coming in the door, you're always on, you're always switched on, you're always chatting, to then being on your own in front of a laptop, and maybe you have a couple of calls a day, but you're not having that constant interaction. I really missed that. So to answer your question, to get away from my home, I go off, I meet friends, I make plans. I always try every week, John, to have something to look forward to. So I meet a friend for, it could be brunch, it could be coffee. I'm meeting a friend that's actually from Mullingar on Thursday, and I'm really looking forward to that. So every week I pencil in someone to meet, to sit down, to have a chat with, to have a coffee with, and just to get outside of the bubble that is work, that is being a mum, that is being a sister, that is, being at home. And it's nice to get away and to be, Louise, carefree Louise is just sitting down having a coffee and doesn't have anything else to think about. So I enjoy doing that. I love the water, so I would have kayaked a lot. I love, I just love water. I think the stillness of it. I don't do the sea swimming because it's absolutely freezing cold. I did try it, but it didn't last very long. I prefer to be in a kayak if I'm in the water. So that's something that I like to do. I have to plan that though, because with the weather the way it is at the moment in Galway, you can't go on the water with it. So it's seasonal. But yeah, that's kind of what I do to get away from everything. I'm either in the water, in the car. I love to sing along to music. I know it sounds really strange, but I love to go for drives on a Sunday and turn up the music and sing along and go where the road takes me. And I love doing that. It's a bit sense of freedom doing stuff like that.
You mentioned also that your son, I think he's 16 or 17 years of age at this day. The fact that you're, a busy professional person, you're out meeting people, you have clients to look after. So are you happy to give your son plenty of freedom to make his own choices in life?
Yeah, I think, John, when your child goes into secondary school, and I think any mums that are listening to this will definitely resonate, you have a sense of fear, because secondary school can be a tough learning place. And it could be, probably, when you talk to most adults, secondary school is where they felt the most challenged, and personally, because there's all these groups, these cliques. Where do I fit in? How do I fit in? Who am I? You're discovering who you are as a young adult. So I think initially I was nervous, and I would have, probably not meaning to, try to make the decisions for my son when he was in secondary school at the beginning, like controlling everything. When are you coming home? Where are you going here? I think I started to realise in the last 2 years that he actually has his head screwed on, John. He's really quite capable of making good decisions. I trust him. Not to do silly things. He is, he's a good head on his shoulders. He's good morals. He's good values. I suppose he's very driven with he does Muay Thai, so he's very self-disciplined with his training. He trains 5-6 days a week, which he's so passionate about. And I think when you have a teenager of that age, they need to have something to focus on, because I know when I was growing up, if you don't have something to focus on, that's where you end up going down the slippery slope, or you end up making those decisions maybe that you wish you didn't make, or hang around or do the wrong things. So he's very focused on his sport, which has been a real blessing, because that means that he's in the gym, John. He's making sure that he's working out, that he's doing everything that he needs to do to perform to the best of his ability when he does have competitions or fights coming up within the club. So that's been absolutely fantastic. It's been really, really good.
And in terms of cooking and housework, I know I'm going a bit deep here, is your son able to do, look after himself, cook his own meals when you're not around, so he has his own independence effectively?
Yeah, I think that's really important, John. I think I grew up with my mum, who stayed at home. She was a housewife, and I think we were a little bit mollycoddled, to be completely honest with you, John, in the sense that the boys in the family, real Irish family, the mammy's done everything for them. The only problem is then when the boys leave the house, they don't know how to, they're eating beans and toast because they don't know how to cook or clean properly. So to answer your question, Conan knows how to cook spaghetti bolognese. I've showed him how to make scrambled eggs. He knows how to make basic food. He's able to put on a wash. He knows what setting the washing machine should go to. He knows to put the colours and the whites together, separate. And he has those life skills, I would say. And I think as a parent, I think it's important that kids are taught life skills at that age, 14, 15, 16. So when they do leave home, they don't feel completely lost. They're able to make a curry, a chicken curry. They're able to make a spaghetti bolognese. They're able to feed themselves good food, not food out of packets or, those cooking noodly things. They're able to actually make proper food, nutritious food, and they're able to, he clean the house. Is really important, I think, for me to give my son those life skills, because I seen growing up, I probably didn't get those life skills. I think I left home quite young, and I was eating crap, John. Like, I'm not going to lie. I was eating croissants and all these kind of packety things. And I remember at the time living next door to my neighbour at the time. This is years ago when I lived in a different part of Galway. And I was fascinated how she made a roast chicken dinner. And I remember she used to bring me in next door and she taught me how to cook, which was a skill in itself. So I learned how to do that. I know one of my cousins taught me how to make lasagna when Conan was maybe 2 years of age. So I had people around me show me how to cook as an adult, which really helped me, make good food for your kid, for yourself and for your child. But I think I would have liked to have had that skill, because it would have made me more confident then going in and being a mom, that I'd be able to make these good meals. So I definitely think that it's a life skill. Your kids need to be able to do the laundry. They need to be able to do the housework and run a house. They need to understand what it takes. That, mum isn't coming around. She's not the little house fairy that cleans up after you, and we don't know how it gets cleaned. There's things that we have to do in order for things to run.
Yeah, I must admit my own cooking skills are a bit rudimentary, to say the least. I can, I'm a meat and 2 vegetable type of person, and potatoes. So I have an air fryer here in the house now, and I do my salmon, my chicken breast, my lamb chops, that something in the air fryer more often than not, to cut down on electricity costs, because, using a full oven in a cooker is extortionately expensive at the moment, the way electricity prices have gone. So I can do the basics and do them well, but ask me to do a roast, wouldn't know where to start, but obviously, looking back at my own life, and this is to tell the truth, when I went to university, I hadn't a clue how to cook. I had to learn the hard way, and I lived in a house with 4 other lads, so we all took upon ourselves to do the cooking once a week. So I had to learn the hard way to, cook for the lads my 1 day a week, so I made mistakes along the way. So to this day, I'm not the most, I'm not the greatest cook by any means, but I can do the basics and do them well, and I get by with that. Yeah. One final question here for you, Louise. Name one relationship you'd like to have again, given another chance, and what would you do differently this time around?
Yeah, one relationship that I would like to do again, like do differently. Let me think. That's a good one now. So I suppose for me, it would probably be a romantic relationship that I've had previously. Someone that I was a partner I was with for nearly 7 years. So why would I do it again? Looking back, John, I think that work was more of a priority than the relationship. And I think at that time I was doing my degree, my bachelor's degree in college, and I was working 40, 50 hours a week. And I was doing everything in between. So I really didn't give it the time it needed. looking back, I can see why it didn't work. Because I didn't give it the time that I should have, really. And that person gave a lot of their own time and they prioritized the relationship, whereas I didn't give it the time that I should have given it. And that's a learning for me. And I think also, since I've set up my own business, I've realized, John, how much time I was actually giving outside of my work day. I mean, to companies or to places I worked for. And I was really consumed by my work at times. And what it's made me realize is that, if I want to have really enriched relationships in my life, romantic relationships, I really need to make the time for them. They're not just going to happen, unless I put time and effort into making sure that they're enriched, that the person feels that I'm present. I'm not just turning up and I have a million things in my head going on about work and I'm thinking about this, that and the other. But I'm actually with them. I'm with them fully and wholeheartedly. And it's not just Louise here in body, but she's not here in mind. So that would be one that I probably learning from. It didn't work out, obviously. I'm not with the person anymore. And that was a couple of years ago. But I can see why that didn't work. From my own perspective, what I need to learn to be a better partner for the next person I'm with. And that is about, me working on myself a little bit more, understanding that I need to show up more for the other person than what I probably would have done in that previous relationship. So that would be one that I would go back and change if I could. Yeah.
That's a perfectly good answer. So this has been a great conversation today, Louise. And things I've got from this conversation are, firstly, I think where you have teenage children in a house, you have to show them how to cook, how to maintain themselves, how to keep a house clean. Then when they go out there to the big bad world of university or to the workplace, they're able to look after themselves and sustain themselves, that they're eating well, looking after their health, and they're not spending a fortune on takeaways. Secondly, what I've learned from Louise today is, a lot of people go to university straight from school, I should say. That doesn't always have to be the way. You can always educate yourself part-time by going to weekend lectures, weekend courses, night courses, as you did, Louise, over the years. And you eventually got your degree, and then you've gone on and done a number of postgraduate diplomas subsequently to that. And thirdly, what I've got from today's conversation is, in terms of romantic relationships, you have to give that relationship as much as you're getting out of it. You can't just expect the other person in the relationship to be the person who gives all the time. And as you said, Louise, that you have to be fully present when that person is around you, that you're not, cluttering your mind up with issues from work, that you're fully there for that person to support them in as much as they're giving you support also. So I think it has to be 50-50 relationship. So on that note, I'll bring today's conversation to a close. Thank you very much, Louise.
I'm quite a happy-go-lucky person and I like to see the best in everybody. So when I was in a relationship that was violent, and he had a belt around my neck, tried to strangle me, there was some really, and I don't know why I'm smiling because it's not something particularly to smile about, but I guess I'm looking at 20-something-year-old me in hindsight now. I think I was naive. I wanted it to work. I wanted things to happen, because what had happened over time with that relationship, it was a 5-year relationship, is I'd been isolated from friends and family. So from those social groups that would kind of guide me and say things are right or they're wrong, I cut myself off from all of those people.